Let's talk about what happens beyond the manual. Hello everyone, this is Bryan Garner with another episode of Beyond the Manual. This is a podcast, a discussion of what happens after you've created documents. How do you create them? How do you manage them? How do you publish them so that people can find them and use them? In the first episode, we talked about that relationship, creating documents, publishing, managing them. In the second episode, we talked about creation and spent a lot of time on the downstream effects of that, how to do that and limit your content chaos and still fulfill your content strategy of getting the right information to the right people at the right time. It doesn't matter whether you're a franchise company or you're a business that has multiple locations, or maybe there are several aspects to your business, or maybe you're just a small business swimming in documentation. Everyone has content. Everyone has content chaos to some degree. This whole discussion is about how to limit that content chaos. You will always have it, but there are ways that you can learn to live with it. And that's what we're going to talk about today when we discuss how to publish content. By publishing content, in the old days, what that meant was printing. And often we would have 3-ring binders of 600-page gorillas that talked about everything. Or we would have multiple binders. And who's got the marketing binder? Who's got the operation? Where's the maintenance binder? How do I find this? Today, that's a little bit different with lots of different publishing platforms. So we're going to talk about some of those. But first we're going to start with what does publishing mean today? It could be print, it could be electronic, but those are features. The benefits of publishing content are that people can find it and they can use it. It doesn't matter if you create content if no one can find it. One of the biggest complaints we hear from franchisors is that no one ever reads our stuff. We wrote this down, nobody ever reads it, they're always asking us questions anyway. That might have a little something to do with their inability to find it. If you can't find content, does it even really exist? The tree falls in the forest, did it make a sound? If no one knows where to find your content, then they can't use it. And why this matters, part of that is obvious, is if they can't find it, then that means that they're going to call you. They're going to ask. It also matters from a consistency standpoint. If they can't find it, then franchisee number 1 remembers something one way. Franchisee 2 has been in the system for a long time, and here's how we used to do it. Consistency gets blown out of the water. And that's a problem at scale. And consistency is obviously one of the most important parts of franchising from a branding standpoint and a customer delivery standpoint. So consistency matters a whole lot. So when you publish content in the right way, then your audiences, your franchisees, your users, your managers will be able to use the information and it will all be uniform and correct. The other aspect of being able to find something is on your side of the business. When you say, we used to have a document that talked about that. I can't find it anywhere. Where is that? Does it exist on someone's hard drive? Did you publish it under a silly name? Did you stick it in a folder somewhere? The more content you have, the harder it is to find things. So as we go through this, and we'll dive down into some of the actual benefits of good publication and management, just know that this topic matters a lot because of how people use it and whether or not you continue to create things that you already have, which is inefficient. We're going to talk a little bit more about the relationship that publishing has to creation of content and also the relation to managing content, because you may be limited in how you can publish things based on how you created them. And when the relationship to management comes down to version control and whether or not users are getting the right information. whether or not it's accurate, and whether or not your credibility suffers some sort of hit because you say one thing in one place and something else in another place. So publication is pretty important to that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about technology as it relates to publication and also governance. People love technology, and it's the one thing that they feel like they can control, and we can gain efficiencies and look at all these bells and whistles. When it comes to publishing content, technology plays a really important role, but a more critical part of that is governance. So we'll talk about why that is and why rules matter. So let's start with how to find and use information. It's helpful, I think, to talk a little bit about search. In the digital space, and I was the search engine optimizer for Delta.com for 10 years. Search happens electronically through a couple of ways. One is a keyword search, and that is really pretty useful when you're inside of a document and you need to find all of the references to that particular word. The other one is search by intent. And an example of that is if I wanted to search a group of documents, not just one Word or one PDF doc, but I wanted to search multiple docs and search into PowerPoint and other places. What if I search for dress code? Usually what you're going to get on a keyword search is all of the instances of the word dress and all of the instances of the word code, and then all of the dress code together. What the person may have meant was, where do I buy uniforms? So intent is a different type of search. Google used to be really good at that. They had the algorithms down, and there were trust indicators within your documentation. The title, the H1, the URL of a document, plus keywords, and that there was a real synergy there. It was 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. That's a little bit more difficult internally for lots of reasons that I'm not going to get into, but it's important for you to realize that the more documents you have, the less capable the system is of actually looking for what you meant to look for. And that creates a problem because for your users who are looking for a sales process and they see that there's one for the West Coast and one for the East Coast and one for Spanish and one for this line of business and one for that line of business, which is the one that I need? Naming and some other things can help you with that. But the point is that technology doesn't actually solve the search problem without some rules associated with how you publish. Multi-file search is different than single file search. Keyword search is different than intent search. And the point is that search can be very difficult. Making matters worse is going backward into how you created the document in the first place. PDFs are a part of life. Everyone is overwhelmed with PDFs, but most of those PDFs started as a Word doc or a Google Doc or a PowerPoint presentation. So by definition, you automatically have 2 versions of every PDF that you created, at least 2 versions. Most of the innovations in publishing technology today have come in the form of how to make PDFs more searchable. And really what that means is that after you've gone through the trouble of creating a document and prettied it up and made sure that it was accurate, then these systems will ask you to break it apart into individual little pieces. And then you have to add what's called metadata. So you add in the description, you add in some keywords. Remember, I talked earlier about a keyword search. Very often these systems will now only search your metadata. They won't actually search your file. That creates some difficulty here. I talked about the importance of being able to find something. Now you can only find things that you intentionally told people can be found here by giving it metadata. That requires governance, it requires skill, some experience. Most of you people don't have that. Content management is a full-time job done part-time by people who have full-time jobs. You want to focus on your core business, and that really isn't content management. So we need to make this as simple as possible for your creators to publish and for your users to find. So what happens if your users can't find the information that they're looking for? Well, if right now I have a broken refrigerator and I need to find the troubleshooting guide for that piece of equipment and I can't find it, then that means probably lost revenue because I'm going to have to call somebody out to fix it. It's going to cause frustration. That's a real-time example of looking for reference material. What happens if I can't find the policy for approving new marketing material? Well, I'm just going to run with it because they got a print deadline over here and because the salesperson's been on me. So now your brand is off a little bit. Another problem with the inability to find something that you know exists is that you're going to get on the phone or you're going to send an email to your franchise business consultant or to the manager of the department or to the admin. And we call this search by email. And it is the least efficient form of search known to man. It also trains your users to only ask instead of self-serving. The whole point of documentation is that you know something, you've written it down so other people can learn from it. And because of the way you published it, you've conditioned them to simply call you. That's a bad thing. So consistency, ability to reference, search by email. And then the last two items here kind of go hand in hand. One is, I alluded to this earlier, you're going to increase your costs if your own users can't find things that they are pretty sure exist. So what will happen is that they will, on their own hard drive, open something, save as, modify it for a new group, publish, and now you've got two different documents that are very similar and cause confusion among your users. Over time, one of those documents gets updated, one of those don't. The gap between right and wrong becomes bigger. A new user finds the wrong one, does something the wrong way, consistency goes wrong. The costs associated with creating something that already exists, managing something that already exists, is just, that's one of the worst costs you can incur in your company, is doing something over and over again with no additional value to it. What the part that goes hand in hand with that is that you've now increased content chaos. So now you've got two Word versions and their associated PDFs. And then those get sent out by email by an FBC because the users couldn't find it. And then they're saved to the hard drive. Multiply that by 100 units, 100 franchisees. Can you send it to me again? It's now exists in their download folder. It exists somewhere on their hard drive. It exists in your own person's outbox. It exists in that person's inbox. All of those different versions with maybe draft 1, draft 2, draft-BG edits, draft-BG edits final 10.3.25. All of those versions are now piled in. That means more docs to search on the same keywords. Now I get a list this long of possible documents for dress code that I'm looking for, and I don't know which one's right. So how you publish is incredibly important to your costs, your consistency, your sanity. And over time, what you'll find is that having some governance, having some rules associated with this, and not the technology, because we've just shown that technology is only as good as the input that we've given it. Over time, a good content management strategy will help you to reduce your costs, increase your service, and increase franchisees or managers' ability to self-serve information. You'll begin to accumulate some of the benefits that come along with scale. So we've talked about some of the reasons why publication matters, how it can save you money, improve consistency, save you some gray hairs further down the road, reduce some of your content chaos. We're going to talk a little bit about the implications to publish that arise from how you've created things, and then what that means for management. Because how you choose, there will not be a perfect answer for any company, but you'll have to weigh the pros and the cons between freedom to create versus governance to manage and what kind of paper trail you need. But here's some of the considerations, and then we'll talk about what some of the best practices are so that you can avoid some of the pitfalls, the big ones, and learn to live with chaos. So when you go to publish, there's a whole lot of dependency on how you created something. If you created in a Word doc or a Google Doc, folks can change those, or they can only view something in one place. So PDFs are they're just industry standard, and love them or hate them. And I both love them and hate them for whatever reasons. Maybe that'll be another episode somewhere down the line. But PDFs are with us, and they're here today. But PDFs mean file share, and that means SharePoint or Dropbox, or you can put it up onto Google Docs, and that's fine. But each one of them becomes a file, and being able to search multiple files, as we've already discussed, is a challenge. So you've got to weigh that balance. It also means likely that you're going to have to break that doc up. So if you've created a 300-page operations manual or 150-page local store marketing manual or whatever that happens to be, that is meant to be all things to the role for which you created the guide or the playbook or the manual or the tool. But sometimes folks don't read to know, they read to do. So they want to go directly to a specific section. In the local store marketing, I want to learn how to increase my morning day part. I need to increase frequency of visit for my restaurant. That sort of necessitates that you're going to have to break up a big document into smaller pieces, because when you publish a PDF, as we talked about earlier, you're really only publishing based on metadata. It makes it more difficult to find the document you want, and then below that, the individual section that you need. So a way to get around that is to do topic-based authoring, which is like Legos. You create a Lego, and then you create another one, and then you put all these Legos together. You've got a table of contents and a manual. Separately, they are the little bits of knowledge that your franchisees, your managers, your employees, your users will need in order to complete their task. And that's what it's all about, is getting the right information to the right people at the right time. Topic-based authoring is a great way to do that. That tends to mean more documents, but there are ways to manage that, and we'll get to that in just a second. Another best practice is to decouple the content from the design. Some folks will design is really, really important for people, and that's terrific for an ad, and it's really great for a job aid. But for information that persists over time, a standard operating procedure, something that changes frequently or even at all, will sometimes have longer content, sometimes shorter content, and now that pixel perfect requires a specific skill set in order to manage. So being agnostic and just having text here and design here is more like how we've designed websites over the past 20 years in responsive design. The text, the images are slightly different, so that whether you're viewing this on a desktop or a wide monitor or on a phone or on a tablet or portrait or landscape or however you view that, the information will change to fit the screen. That's sort of what we're looking for here. And if you can get to that state, then terrific. And then how you publish also has some downstream effects to how you manage things. If you're naming a URL, for example, you want to have dashes in it instead of spaces. It just improves search. If you're doing that with a PDF, a tendency is to put the date into the document. That's fine. That tells you what date it was created. But what it doesn't do is tell you whether or not another version of that exists beyond that date. So while that date may be recent, it may have missed a really critical update, which has a different date on it. Both of those are in search. The dates are going to appear alphabetically, not chronologically in that particular case. You run the risk of somebody seeing old information. Another really overlooked, and I can't stress this one enough, part of publication is that everyone can create, and it's no one's job to remove. Almost nobody listening to this or watching this right now has an archival process, or a good one. Some of you do, and congratulations, you are star pupils. But whenever you create a new version of them, the old version is no longer useful to your users. It may be useful to legal. It may be useful to your ops people so that they can remember how they used to do things. But you can rename items, remove them from the general population, the general search population, so that you can keep the chaos down for your users. Another challenge that can happen when you're publishing that way is that every piece of information becomes its own island. But in the real world, that information probably referred is a step in a chain where it refers to another document or more information, and you need more context. So some of the best practices there are to have standards for your naming convention, not only of your files, but also of your folders. Too many folders is a problem. We used to talk a lot in terms of site navigation as to whether a site was flat, which means that its top navigation would have 10, 12, 15 different categories and only a few items below it, or if it was deep, in which case it would only have 3 top level navigations, and then the branching underneath that would go 5, 6 clicks deep. Which one's right? Kind of depends on your content, but really, the general rule of thumb is to have no more than 8 categories, 6 to 8 categories, and then to have a taxonomy underneath that. So how you name your files, how you name your folders matters. Having a good archive process so that only the current versions are available for your franchisees and your users, but legal and other audiences still have access to it. So how do you gracefully remove something from production and put it into storage? And how do you do that? Who does that is an important part of this. If everyone can create and no one removes, eventually you just keep buying more storage space. And this is where we talked about technology earlier, that technology becomes an enabler of bad practices, that you simply increase the size of your storage shed instead of cleaning it out. And if you clean as you go, and the easy way to do that is, I just created a new version, let me get rid of the old version. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to rename it Z at the beginning of it so it appears alphabetically lower, so that it is a mnemonic for people, an automatic indicator when they see the Z in a file name or in a folder name. This is old. We need to keep it, but it's no longer pertinent to me. And then lastly, for management, having a librarian is really important for whatever tool you use to publish this information, whether it be SharePoint or an intranet or a Dropbox or a Google Docs. Having someone who is in charge of archiving, of ensuring that the naming convention has been followed, of removing old items, of making sure that things are searchable, putting the proper metadata on it. That doesn't have to be a full-time job, but it does have to be someone's responsibility. And having a librarian is the single most effective way to keep down content chaos in any organization, be it a franchise or a car dealership or someone who creates manuals. It will come as a surprise to no one that my company, my family of companies, has more content than maybe the Library of Congress. How do we keep it all in check? Training, librarians, naming conventions, standards, archival. It's a battle, and you shouldn't have to know how to do that. So that's why we're here, is to help you devise the strategy to do that, give you some of the tools, and maybe give you some tips and tricks so that this isn't so overwhelming, because it doesn't have to be, but it does have to be intentional, and you do have to give it some thought. Beyond the Manual is a Manual Makers production. This episode was hosted by Bryan Garner, directed by Chase Flacius, produced and edited by Charlotte Blow, commentary by Lucia the Spanish Paella. Visit manualmakers.com for more resources. If you like what we're doing, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts.